You're making it to the final round. The feedback sounds positive. They say you're highly qualified, and then they choose someone else. If this keeps happening, it isn't random, and it's not bad luck. Today, we're breaking down why strong, experienced professionals get passed over at the final stage, and what actually separates the finalist from the person who gets the offer. In this video, you'll learn the real reason companies don't hire the most qualified candidate, the subtle interview mistakes executives make without realizing it, and how to position yourself as the safest, most strategic hiring decision in the room. The first challenge is that you're interviewing as a doer, not as the strategic solution. Finalists often demonstrate competence, but not high-level value. So you've got to assume that by the time you get to the final rounds of interviewing, most of the time, everyone's going to have similar backgrounds in terms of education and experience. They're looking for who is going to set themselves apart as the best fit in their company. If you're having challenges, you might just be answering questions, but not leading conversations. You're being reactive as opposed to proactive during an interview and how you're answering questions. You might be waiting for prompts instead of steering the dialogue towards what you want to talk about, right? Towards your accomplishments, achievements, special projects, key initiatives that you've been a part of. You should demonstrate a command of scope and priorities in all of your answers. Another challenge is that people are describing responsibilities, but not measurable outcomes. So they're saying things like, I managed, I led, versus I delivered 20% growth. Hiring managers buy impact, not activity. When you quantify what you've done, so that means adding metrics, numbers, percentages, dollar values, this signals senior level maturity in what you're able to do. Also, you might not be translating experience into their business problem. So you might be telling generic leadership stories that don't really have anything to do with what they're looking for. It's kind of like, oh, that's nice. You might be failing to connect your background to their current challenges, so the issues they're having right now. The finalist must demonstrate contextual intelligence, so knowing what to say when and what is appropriate in specific scenarios or situations. If you want my insights on interviewing with compelling confidence, download our free Smart Job Seekers Guide linked below. You also might be positioning yourself as capable, but not indispensable. Many finalists are qualified, but few make themselves feel essential. Hiring decisions are about risk mitigation. At the final stage, competence is assumed. What they're evaluating now is confidence, clarity, and chemistry. The second challenge is you're not managing perception or executive presence. Hiring at the final stage is psychological, not just technical. People have to feel like they know, like, and trust you and believe that you're the best fit for the role. Some challenges are you might be over-explaining instead of executive summarizing. Long-winded responses, generally longer than 2 minutes, can dilute your authority because people get lost in them or confused. Senior leaders communicate with clarity and brevity. Strategic framing is something else that you want to think about, as opposed to storytelling overload. A lot of people know, okay, especially with behavioral interviewing, which is very common now, they know that they need to have some stories ready, but they're bringing too many stories that aren't relevant. You're unintentionally signaling uncertainty, and this is common. Sometimes people are using filler words. They are over justifying their career transition. So talking too much about why they made certain decisions in their career. Or they're defensive in their explanations about why they did certain things if someone just asks them. So you're going to make sure that you're mindful of that. Another thing is you're answering but not influencing. That is one of the biggest challenges. I have people who tell me, Portia, you know what? I was in the interview and I answered all the questions that they asked me, but I just don't feel like I knocked it out of the park. I don't feel like I'm the one that they feel like they need to hire. And that's because you were just reacting and answering questions. Final interviews are decision meetings. In what you're saying, you should be shaping how you are perceived, your language. I've talked about the stories that you're telling, how you show up, nonverbal body language. All of these things affect how you're perceived. Then also you want to think about the positioning in your language. You might want to say, to reframe back to the person that you understand what they're looking for. So you can say, what you're looking for is a sales leader who can come in and create a solid strategy and get a team on board and bought into what new process is going on. I just made that up. That's an example. Another challenge is you might not be elevating your leadership narrative. This is when people are just giving a lot of tactical examples without strategic framing. So I did this, I did this, I did that, but there isn't a cohesive story to that. Another thing to think about is your positioning again. So for example, directors speak differently than managers do. Their word choice, the things that they focus on, and sometimes even their tone. Executives, for example, they like to communicate in terms of vision, systems, and impact, higher level. So you want to make sure that what you're saying is on par with the level of role that you're targeting and the audience that you're talking to. Also, energy and composure under pressure is often overlooked. So late stage interviews, they're testing your emotional readiness. Can you handle these things and these questions that we're going to throw at you in this 7-person panel interview? Are you calm? Or are you outwardly nervous and trying to prove yourself? They are looking to hire a candidate that often feels ready right now on day one. But there's one more reason why highly qualified professionals lose the offer. The third challenge is that you're not de-risking the hiring decision. The person who gets hired is the safest bet, and that's not always the person with the most impressive resume. When people are missing this mark, the interviewer doesn't understand your 30, 60, 90-day plan. You didn't articulate how you would start strong and hit the ground running in your new role. Hiring managers are really looking for certainty, not a whole lot of potential, especially if they're hiring from the outside. They want somebody who's ready now. Another issue is that you didn't address silent objections. Are you overqualified? Do they assume that you're overqualified? Do they assume that you're too expensive? Do they think that you're not industry specific enough because you're coming from a different industry? If you don't neutralize these types of objections, they can assume things about you and assume that you would be a risky hire. Another issue is that you didn't demonstrate cultural alignment. Skills are going to get you to being a finalist, but fit with the company is what gets you the offer. One way to do this is to mirror your language and mirror the values that you see or that you've researched are important to the company. That alignment matters, and that will help them believe, even sometimes subconsciously, that you're a better fit than other candidates. Another issue is that people don't close their interview strategically. So there's a weak ending to the interview versus a confident close. Asking questions like, is there anything that would prevent you from moving forward with me as a candidate? Sounds direct. Some people are scared to ask that question, but it's really powerful because one, they're generally going to tell you if they have any apprehensions, and that gives you time to address them directly as opposed to leaving the interview, thinking everything went well, and they're assuming all this risk about you and choose someone else. So this gives you a chance, if you ask that question, to really reinforce your value before the interview was over. And another thing that I see a lot is that people don't follow up with reinforcement. So you want a strong follow-up after the interview that really reiterates the impact and the value that you could bring to the role and your interest in the role. Thank you emails and thank you letters should reinforce your ROI, the ROI that they would get from hiring you, not just gratitude for the opportunity. Sure, you want to be thankful and express that gratitude and be appreciative, but you also want to tie that back to the impact that you could have. If you keep being the finalist but not getting the offer, it's not because you're unqualified. It's because at the final stage, companies aren't hiring the most experienced person. They're hiring the clearest thinker, the lowest risk decision, and the person who already feels like they're in the role. When you shift from proving yourself to positioning yourself, everything changes. If you want help refining how you show up in interviews at a high level, make sure you subscribe and check out our Smart Job Seekers Guide below. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe and like the video.